The Roots of a Science of Consciousness in Hermetic Alchemy. By Dennis William Hauck. Alchemy is not only the origin of systematic experimentation in chemistry but also the first attempt to create a cohesive science of consciousness. Those early philosophers of nature treated mental contents as objective phenomena, and they believed the universal operations used in their laboratories could also transform a dark leaden mind into a shining golden one. The Hermetic philosophy behind alchemy taught that our thoughts and feelings are the thoughts and feelings of the whole universe. That intrinsic perspective generated deep insight into the structure of mind. Alchemists viewed consciousness as a natural force that could be harnessed through a marriage of logic and intuition, a union of objective and subjective realities. Like modern seekers of a unified field theory, alchemists sought one true philosophy of universal principles that were as valid in nature as they were in their own minds and souls, and in the one mind of the cosmos. The resulting cauldron of ideas on mind and matter leads to a truer understanding of the philosopher's stone, not as an object but a state of mind. Western alchemy was syncretized from a blend of practical and spiritual traditions by Alexandrian scholars. Between 300 BCE and 50 BCE, Egyptian, Greek, Arabian, and Jewish alchemists assembled in Alexandria to work out the principles of transformation that made alchemy possible. What emerged was a coherent philosophy of matter based on physical observations and philosophical interpretations. That it took nearly 250 years for scholars to formalize a discipline of alchemy should not be surprising. The ancient world moved at a very slow pace. Communication was based on letters, books, and first-person accounts. Travel was dangerous and time-consuming, although many scholars who came to Alexandria stayed there to have access to the latest manuscripts and discoveries. Discussions on basic topics went on for decades. For instance, the earliest version of the theory of elements was a philosophical model in which matter arose from three idealized elements known as liquid, solid, and air. Fire was considered the agent of change between them. This view was based on the philosophy of Plato, 428 to 348 BCE, and Aristotle, 384 to 322 BCE, who postulated that the constantly changing world of our senses is based on an unchanging, invisible world of perfect forms. Then, around 270 BCE, resistance to the Platonic view from practicing alchemists and physicians led to a more empirical four-elements theory that included fire as an elemental substance, along with water, earth, and air. This school of thought focused on experimental evidence instead of hidden causes, and the arguments in Alexandria turned from philosophical to practical. One example of the new empirical approach is the way in which the order of creation of the elements was established. It was generally agreed that fire came first, then air, but there was great debate over which came next, earth or water. The correct order was determined by the water demonstration experiment in which a beaker of water was allowed to evaporate, leaving behind solid residue. Therefore, water contains earth, and was created before it. During the final 50 years BCE, there was a backlash against the empiricists that culminated in the establishment of a more metaphysical view of the four elements. In this Hermetic interpretation, alchemists combined the fire of nature with the fire of mind as the single agent of change in the universe. Their manifesto was the ancient emerald tablet of Hermes Trismegistus, which described the dynamic relationship between the one mind of the universe and the one thing of the manifested world. The new perspective on the role of consciousness in the universe inspired alchemists around the world and was responsible for the flourishing of the proto-science of alchemy. The teaching spread from Alexandria to other Mediterranean countries, the Arabian lands, and on to India and China. They reached Europe with the Moorish invasion of Spain in the 8th century. In the 600 years from 1200 to 1800, more books were written about alchemy than any other subject, and nearly every alchemist kept a copy of the Emerald Tablet to use as a guide. Admittedly, the new perspective enabled the rise of puffers and charlatans who claimed to change lead into gold, but it was also the first step toward a science of mind and matter free of cultural and religious dogma. Consciousness as a force of nature. The idea that consciousness is a force of nature, and that it plays an integral role in the evolution of the universe, is one of the central principles of alchemy. All consciousness originates from a single point, which lies outside of time and space, yet it is the source of the universe and is everywhere present within it. The concept evolved from Plato's theory of ideal forms existing in the infinite consciousness of the divine mind. The transition from perfect forms to manifested physical objects was accomplished through an intermediary deity Plato named Mind the Maker. In alchemical philosophy, this was interpreted as the mind of nature, which fashions the physical world from the light of the one mind. Philo of Alexandria, 20 BCE to 50 CE, associated the Logos, or divine word, with both Plato's Mind the Maker deity and the angel of the Lord described in the Hebrew Bible. He viewed the Logos as the tool of creation, a cohesive vibration that brought order out of chaos. The Logos is the bond of everything, he wrote, holding all things together and binding all the parts, and prevents them from being dissolved and separated. By the Renaissance, the Hermetic concept of the one mind had evolved into a detailed explanation of how the universe was created and how transformation takes place within it. These principles are consolidated in a stunning Rosicrucian engraving called Tabula Smaragdina, Latin for the Emerald Tablet. Painted by Matthew Marion in 1618, it depicts the realm of mind above and the duality of matter below. But an essential feature of this engraving is often overlooked. If we examine the realm above, we see two great suns rising over the horizon. The larger sun in the background is the ineffable one mind, whose rays encompass the whole universe. But in front of it is the smaller sun of Mind the Maker. It can be thought of as the matrix of reality behind the laws of physics and biology. These laws are the crystallized thoughts symbolized by the archetypal angels embedded in the smaller sun. Why is the divine domain separated into two aspects? It implies that the ultimate one mind is outside our world and does not directly participate in it. Instead, the Logos, or information of creation, was projected into our reality as Mind the Maker. Therefore, we can only know God through nature or what the Emerald Tablet called the operation of the sun. This revelation was a basic part of the Renaissance zeitgeist and helped spread a more objective way of looking at reality. Insights into the human condition are revealed in the lower half of the engraving. The duality of our existence is symbolized in two opposing paths in the manifested world. On the left is the daytime world of aggressive solar energy and masculine symbols. On the right is the nighttime world of passive lunar energy and feminine symbols. Only by uniting masculine rationality with feminine feelings, the quantia and qualia of our consciousness, can we free ourselves from the clouds of unknowing and enter the hidden dimension above. This balanced state of consciousness is personified by the hermaphroditic alchemist at the center. In addition to the vertical axis of spiritual and material realms and the horizontal axis of the duality of light and darkness, there is a third axis projecting out from the center of the drawing toward the viewer. The seven-layered ball of light at the center is the birth of the philosopher's stone as it leaves heaven and enters the material realm. To achieve this alchemical state of consciousness, one must progress through the 7 layers leading to the philosopher's stone. This is a strange, Ouroboros journey that unites the opposing forces of masculine and feminine, inner and outer, above and below. The journey begins in the outer ring with our leaving the planetary influences of our immediate environment and returning home to the stars. The next ring is a journey through time from daily routines to the infinite time scale of the universe. The next 3 rings bring awareness of the basic trinity of the forces of creation, sulfur, mercury, and salt, what modern science refers to as energy, light, and matter. The 6th ring contains a direct message to the seeker, ignis quatuor ad opus reperuntur, or 4 grades of fire are required for the work. This is the key that unlocks the 7th and innermost circle. Within a central upward-pointing triangle of fire is inscribed a cipher for the philosopher's stone or the ultimate knowledge of reality. The secret fire of the alchemists. Fire was always a point of friction and debate, because it was not only a sensory experience but also deeply symbolic of invisible natural energy. Fire was also associated with health, metabolism, and aging, and the light of fire represented thinking, inspiration, and enlightenment. In working out an acceptable theory of fire, one of the biggest stumbling blocks was that the ancients had no clear concept of energy. They referred to energetic interactions and unseen forces as spirits, which existed independently in the physical world, as well as in the human body and mind. Medieval alchemists were fascinated by fire and referred to themselves as philosophers of fire. They recognized 4 grades of fire: elementary fire, central fire, celestial fire, and secret fire. Elementary fire is the physical fire of our ovens and furnaces in everyday life. Central fire is the archetypal source of mind, the maker that burns at the heart of every material thing. Celestial fire is the eternal, non-burning white light of the one mind. The secret fire is the hidden fire that burns similarly in the human mind. Antoine Joseph Pernety, 1716–1796, describes it in his work The Great Art. In Allegories and Fables, he wrote, "The philosophers have given to this secret fire names such as the sword or knife, but they have also described it as the fire that Prometheus stole from heaven or Vulcan used to create the thunderbolts of Jupiter." Pernety concluded that this discerning fire is external to matter, yet is somehow able to change it or cause its corruption. In his book, Alchemy, Hermetic scholar Franz Hartmann, 1838–1912, warned that this fiery state of consciousness could be dangerous. The secret fire of the alchemists is an electric, fiery, hidden power, he wrote, the great pristine form which underlies all organic and inorganic matter. It is an electro-spiritual force, a creative power which, when aroused into action, can as easily destroy as it can create. In the Hermetic tradition, the secret fire is often associated with vitriol, which is a thick oily form of sulfuric acid, a powerful corrosive that can eat through just about anything. In spiritual work, vitriol is seen as a kind of passionate liquid fire that burns away impurities in the soul. In personal work, it is a ruthless and self-deprecating inspection of one's thoughts and motives. Brutal vitriolic objectivity became a useful tool in the alchemists' fight against lies and dogma, and the word eventually entered the vernacular as a synonym for harsh, biting criticism. Adepts in alchemy believed the vitriolic inner fire could be intensified and refocused using the same methods they followed in their laboratory work. These universal operations pass through 3 stages known as the black phase of purification, the white phase of clarity in which the essential ingredients are identified, and the final red phase of projection and transmutation. Experimental study of consciousness. Paracelsus, 1493–1541, was a controversial Swiss alchemist and physician whose laboratory work was guided by the principle that the new matter of alchemical transmutations was somehow present in the secret fire of the alchemist's own consciousness. The matter is contained in a secret fire, he wrote, and comes into being in the occult vessel. Paracelsus was convinced a disciplined imagination was the unexpected key to transforming reality. Imagination is a great power, he continued, and if the world knew what strange things can be produced by the power of the imagination, the public authorities would force idle people to stop daydreaming and keep busy at work. According to Paracelsus, transformation was possible by stripping away the outer form of a substance to reveal its first matter, and then projecting the light of pure consciousness to transform it into something new. The reason this is possible is that the microcosm and macrocosm are united within the light of one mind, and the human mind is the focal point through which nature manifests. Specifically, Paracelsus believed a person could achieve union with the divine mind by focusing on the infinite nature of his or her own consciousness and moving from the realm of worldly illusion to that of permanent truth. Only when the illusion of self has disappeared from my heart and mind, he wrote in Liber de Occulta Philosophia, or Book of the Hidden Philosophy, and my consciousness risen to that state in which there is no more personal self, then, will I not be the doer of works, and will not that spirit of wisdom perform its wonders through my instrumentality? A similar method of emptying the self of worldly attachments was described by German alchemist and mystic Jacob Boehme, 1575–1624. He proclaimed that all objective reality arises from a formless void he called the Ungrund, German for the place without ground. The supersensual abyss, he said, hath no ground to stand on and there is no place to dwell in. It may fitly be compared to nothing, for it is deeper than anything, and is as nothing with respect to all things, forasmuch as it is not comprehensible by any of them. And because it is nothing, it is therefore free from all things. A person cannot express or utter what it is, there being nothing to which it may be compared. This primordial abyss, which resonates with the alchemist's first matter or modern ideas of the quantum foam, is brought to manifestation by the primordial urge of the divine mind to become aware of itself. Bohm believed this deeper reality could be directly experienced by purifying consciousness to a state before nature and creature. To do so, we must extricate our consciousness from all that is the effect of our time and place. What remains is a state of absolute simplicity, an abiding and enduring sense of contentment and deep humility. Bohm faced relentless persecution from the church for his ideas, yet he never let his ego get in the way of the truth he experienced. My writings are only for those who are willing to receive the truth in a simple and childlike state of mind, he cautioned, for it is they who are to possess the kingdom of God. I have written only for those who seek truth, to the cunning and world-wise, I have nothing to say. Robert Flood, 1574–1637, the Rosicrucian Grand Master of England, was a practicing alchemist and mathematician who also felt consciousness is embedded in the universe, but he believed it could be studied objectively. He suggested the presence of consciousness in the external world could be demonstrated by studying parallel actions that remained linked by sympathetic or synchronistic forces created at their inception. He argued that two or more identical actions performed simultaneously under the same conditions should share a conscious bond whose effects could be observed. Flood also theorized that thoughts from the divine mind acted like waves or vibrations to create physical reality and link the human mind with divine consciousness. In 1618, he invented two single-string musical instruments, monochords, based on his theories. His mundane monochord played microcosmic or terrestrial sounds on our normal musical scale, while his divine monochord played macrocosmic or celestial sounds on the Pythagorean scale of tones. Alchemical cosmology is a form of panpsychism, which views consciousness as a property of every created thing. But the alchemists went a step further and treated consciousness as part of the fabric of space from which the universe emerges continuously in every moment, a force of nature amenable to experimentation and even manipulation. Several leading Renaissance alchemists tried to create a science of consciousness by resurrecting the Pythagorean notion that the universe was created through the generation of an archetypal series of numbers. According to Pythagoras, the indivisible source from which the universe evolves is the monad or singularity. The dyad, or duality, is born through the division of the monad, an act which creates the plurality of numbers. From numbers are derived the point, the line, two-dimensional objects, and three-dimensional bodies. From manifested bodies come the four elements, which make up the basis of physical reality. John Dee, 1527–1608, was an English mathematician and alchemist who thought the Pythagorean system offered a way of using mathematics to explain the role of mind in the universe. He entered Cambridge at the age of 15 and was soon recognized as one of England's greatest geniuses. He extended the boundaries of the mathematics of his day by building a firm footing in arithmetic and inventing an elaborate geometric hierarchy of new applications and terminology. Dee conceived of the monad as the first being or idea that contained the totality of all things, and at the age of 30, set out to conceptualize this universal force in mathematical terms. Finally, in 1564, after 7 years of intense effort, he completed a step-by-step proof and published it under the title The Hieroglyphic Monad. Using Euclidean geometry, Dee created a single symbol to embody the power of the monad. Using just a compass and square, he constructed a cipher that included all the archetypal planetary forces in their proper relationships. He was so sure he encapsulated all the information necessary for the creation of the cosmos, that he advised astronomers to stop peering into the heavens to understand the universe and instead meditate on his monad. If his hieroglyphic monad were dropped into an ocean of first matter at the beginning of time, the universe as we know it would emerge. Giordano Bruno, 1548 to 1600, was another mathematician and alchemist who viewed the universe as an infinite living presence that possessed a monadic mind. He described three basic types of monads. The first was the one mind, the ultimate monad that contained all other monads. The second class of monads were human souls. Each of us lives in our own monad, our own little world, which is a microcosmic replica of the properties of the divine monad. Finally, there exist the lowest monads of matter or minima, which are invisible atoms and nearly unconscious bridges between mind and matter. Bruno believed that the one mind was not logically knowable, and that only by combining qualitative and quantitative approaches could deeper truths be realized. Fascinated by the workings of the mind and how memories were formed, Bruno experimented with elaborate mnemonic systems and invented a geometry of language to try to deepen the power of human understanding. His geometric language was a kind of poesis that attempted to ground ephemeral intuitions and intimations into earthly forms humans could grasp. His multi-layered prose used verbal patterns that opened layers of greater sensitivity to the ideas being discussed. Virtual designs of circles, curves, angles, points, and lines in the subtext created linguistic images that communicate deeper, and sometimes impossible to articulate, levels of meaning. At his public lectures, Bruno asserted that the sun is the center of our planetary system, and the stars are really distant suns with their own planets, which may also harbor intelligent life. In his fifth dialogue, Bruno declared, "The universe is one, infinite, immobile. It is not capable of comprehension and therefore is endless and limitless, and to that extent infinite and indeterminable, and consequently immobile." In 1592, the Church imprisoned Bruno and insisted he recant his heresies, but he steadfastly refused. Finally, on February 8, 1600, after 7 years of merciless torture, the inquisitors tied a gag tightly around his tongue and took him to Campo de' Fiori Square in Rome, where, unable to speak to the crowd or cry out, he was burned alive. Bruno's and D's work with monads was significantly expanded by German mathematician, alchemist, and philosopher Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, 1646 to 1716. He published details of his theory in his book Monadology, in which he postulated the existence of atoms of consciousness present everywhere throughout the universe. Leibniz reasoned that all substances are material things that can be divided into smaller units, but at some point in this infinite process we get to an ultimate essence that can no longer be rationally understood. Therefore, the basis of physical reality is not an objective particle but a subjective perceptive presence. Leibniz's monads are similar to elementary particles, but they are units of consciousness and have their own subjective impressions that create reality at that level. Embedded in space and time, monads are arranged in hierarchies or levels of consciousness, ranging from the highest awareness of the divine monad that contains all other monads to the lowest, proto-conscious monad at the border between mind and matter. Monads at the lowest level are unconscious, unaware, and without memory, but they possess the potential to become conscious. Leibniz's theory of atoms of consciousness provided alchemists with a mechanism for transmutation. If human consciousness could be projected into the primal monadic layer, then the atoms of creation might reflect the mind of the observer. Alchemists refer to this kind of imaginative thought projection as animating the mercury. As a philosopher, Leibniz found himself in the middle between Descartes, 1596 to 1650, who taught the mechanistic view that matter was inert, and Spinoza, 1632 to 1677, who taught that all matter had a spiritual core and God was the only substance in the universe. Like his fellow alchemists, Leibniz believed that consciousness was omnipresent, but ridiculed the idea of an anthropomorphic deity and instead supported the concept of an abstract universal mind. He actually prepared an ontological proof that such a being was a necessary part of reality. The Azoth of the philosophers. An intuitive interpretation of monad theory can be found in a Rosicrucian meditative emblem known as the Azoth of the philosophers. It first appeared as an illustration for the book, The Azoth of the Philosophers, attributed to the legendary Swiss alchemist Basil Valentine, 1394 to 1450. At the center is the monadic mind of the alchemist inscribed in a circle. The downward pointing triangle superimposed over his face is the cipher for water or divine grace. So, within the triangle is the divine monad merging with the mind of the alchemist. The idea that the human mind and the one mind of the universe could unite in meditation was a central tenet of medieval alchemy. In fact, prayer and meditation were considered a necessary part of successful transformations in the laboratory. The Azoth diagram shows the stages of spiritual purification necessary to reach that highest level of consciousness. The marriage of human and divine, a state of consciousness known to initiates as the philosopher's stone, is created by the secret fire. Our universal secret, said Paracelsus, needs only the most secret fire of the philosophers. The secret fire, therefore, and the Azoth are sufficient. The Azoth is an ancient concept developed by Alexandrian alchemists. The Latin word is a stylized form of Azok, an Arabian poetic word for Mercury that refers to the higher, idealized archetype from which common Mercury derives its characteristics. Alchemists sometimes refer to it as philosophical Mercury or Sophic Mercury. The word Azoth is made up of the first letter, A, of the Latin, Greek, and Hebrew alphabets, then the final letter, Z, of the Latin alphabet, followed by the final letters, O, or Omega, of the Greek and T, or Tet, of the Hebrew alphabets. Azoth. The spelling of the word implies that Azoth is a universal solvent for anything from A to Z, everything in the alpha-omega of our existence from mental contents to physical substances. Just as common mercury flows freely and has the power to dissolve metals, so does the Azoth possess the power to break down or assimilate anything in the world. It was also referred to as the universal solvent or alkest that digests all things, including the human ego, worldly concerns, fears, habits, and judgments. After the application of the Azoth on the personal level, only a pure mind is present. The overall process depicted in this drawing is the dissolution of everything human to create a sacred space that will be filled with the divine mind, just as Paracelsus described. Hermetic philosophy postulates 7 levels of consciousness based on the planetary archetypes, from dark leaden Saturn to the brilliant golden sun. The 7 rays emanating out from the monad of the alchemist indicate these levels that must be traversed to achieve enlightenment. Following each ray is a roundel, which is a circle containing a scene that elaborates on the meaning of the operation necessary at each stage. Before the work of transformation begins, the alchemist must become centered on the cross of the elements. His body is shown in perfect balance with the 4 elements as depicted by his arms and legs. His right foot is firmly planted on earth and his left is in water. In his right hand is a torch of fire and in his left hand an ostrich feather symbolizing air. The alchemist also stands balanced between the masculine and feminine powers. Sol, the sun king of logic and thought, is seated on a lion to his right. Luna, the moon queen of intuition and emotions, is seated on a great fish in the ocean to her left. With the alchemist's mind and body in a state of perfect equilibrium and repose, the disruptive and challenging application of the Azoth can proceed. The driving force behind this transformation is the secret fire, the liquid fire of alchemical vitriol. In the Azoth drawing, all the Latin words contained in the outer ring spell out a sentence that describes the search for the philosopher's stone, visita interiora terrae rectificando invenis occultum lapidem, which translates as, visit the innermost parts of the earth, and by setting things right, you will find the hidden stone. The first letter of each of the 7 Latin words in the outer ring spells out a new word, vitriol. As mentioned earlier, this is sulfuric acid, a powerful corrosive that is symbolic of the energy that drives the whole wheel of transformation. Vitriol is both the fundamental liquid fire that causes chemical changes in the laboratory and the mercurial secret fire that brings about the spiritual perfection of the alchemist. When the relentless dissolving power of vitriol is applied to the contents of mind, thoughts, emotions, habits, and memories fade away. That results in a flowing, clarified state of pure consciousness that can be intensely focused. For alchemists, the philosopher's stone was mundane consciousness brought to its highest and most objective level. The hidden stone of the philosophers is the self-contained monad of awareness each of us carries that has the potential to become a brilliant star, a gateway to the cosmic mind. 3 forces of creation. The energies driving alchemical transformation are the same forces that created the universe. They are represented at the apexes of a large inverted triangle behind the central emblem and are labeled spiritus, spirit, anima, soul, and corpus, body. These are the tria prima, the primordial forces that the alchemists named sulfur, mercury, and salt. Of course, these are not the common materials of the same name but idealized principles based on their characteristics. As noted earlier, such archetypal forces are often referred to as philosophical or sophic substances. Paracelsus defined the tria prima by how they behave in fire. In the burning of wood, for example, sulfur is the potential energy or fuel that is consumed in the fire, mercury is the light, heat, and vapors emitted by the fire, and salt is the ash left behind. Sulfur is the solar, energetic, masculine principle of spirit that gives a substance its active properties and identity in relationship to other substances. Mercury is the lunar, passive, feminine principle of soul that represents the eternal source of life and consciousness. Alchemists referred to mercury as the mother of the stone and felt it was the mediator between sulfur and salt in the creation of new compounds and life forms. Salt represents materialization, crystallization, precipitation, and the formation of bodies in general. English alchemist and Rosicrucian philosopher Francis Bacon accepted the Paracelsian view that all manifested things arise from the interaction of the 3 forces of sulfur, salt, and mercury. But Bacon eliminated salt and theorized that it was created later, through the interaction of sulfur and mercury. He associated sulfur with the fire element, which he described as a kind of intelligent passionate energy. Mercury had a dual nature combining the elemental characteristics of water and air. Mercury in its watery aspect produced flowing, volatile, morphing phenomena. In its airy aspect, it was the source of etheric forces, such as the life force and mental phenomena. Bacon worked out a complicated system to explain how the different kinds of matter came from the union of sulfur and mercury, but he kept his theory secret because he could not find a way to prove it. This frustration may be what prompted him to develop a systematic way of finding the truth behind all natural phenomena. In his treatise, Of the Interpretation of Nature, he described his method as a new light in nature which should illuminate all the border regions of our present knowledge, and so, spreading further and further, should disclose and bring into sight all that is most hidden and secret in the world. Bacon's new light in nature became the modern scientific method, which transmuted alchemy itself into the new regimen of chemistry. But many of the alchemists' intuitive insights are being confirmed in contemporary disciplines, most notably psychology and quantum physics. And, as stated previously, the 3 forces of creation recognized by the alchemists, sulfur, mercury, and salt, are the same forces of creation, energy, light, and matter, recognized by modern cosmologists. Mind and matter, the philosopher's stone. The philosopher's stone is the central mystery of alchemy. Receive this stone which is not a stone, said the Alexandrian alchemist Zosimos, circa 300 CE, a precious thing that has no value, a thing of many shapes that has no shape, this unknown which is known by all. Zosimos surmised that the stone of the wise was simply human consciousness, a mercurial thing of many shapes that has no shape of its own. Paracelsus described the philosopher's stone as a state of higher consciousness that revealed the true nature of reality to anyone who possessed it. John Dee thought of the philosopher's stone as a physical object, possibly the human brain, that was, he said, the force behind the evolution of life and the universal binding power which unites minds and souls in human oneness. One alchemist who spent his life searching for the philosopher's stone was Irishman Robert Boyle, 1627 to 1691. He was a high-minded scientist who tried to free alchemy of its secrecy and open it up to shared research. Boyle held frequent meetings with his fellow alchemists, including Isaac Newton, Gottfried Leibniz, John Locke, and fellow members of the Royal Society. He also set up active correspondence with other alchemists throughout Europe. His network of cooperating alchemists became known as the Invisible College. But 2 years before his death, Boyle announced he had made strides in creating the philosopher's stone that required he spend more time alone in his laboratory. He stopped scheduling meetings with other alchemists and cut back his participation in the Invisible College. He explained the products of his work on the philosopher's stone were exhibiting mysterious properties that should not or could not be shared publicly. The full and complete uses cannot be mentioned, partly because, in spite of my previous philanthropy, he said, I am now engaged to secrecy. Like Boyle, English alchemist and mathematician Isaac Newton, 1643 to 1727, sought to create the philosopher's stone. Newton is revered as one of the most important scientists in history, yet his personal philosophy was based on a literal interpretation of the Bible. Newton wanted to go back before the fall to a perfect state of knowing, and he believed angels came to Adam with a way to return to that purest state of mind. The Emerald Tablet described that path, and Newton viewed alchemists as holy adepts in the great work of returning mankind to the splendor of the garden. Newton believed the philosopher's stone would enable direct communication with angels, who embodied the thoughts of God. His efforts to decipher those divine thoughts may have inspired his universal equations on force and gravity and guided his experiments with light. From the beginning of Newton's research into the nature of light, he sensed the divine mind at work. Newton was against the corpuscular theory of light because he said, it robbed matter of its divine essence. He speculated in his private journals that light might possess the dual nature of mercury, existing as both particles of matter and waves of energy. But such an idea, he noted, would never be accepted by the scientists of his time. Indeed, it would be another 200 years before the dual nature of light would be proven. In the competition between alchemy and the emerging field of chemistry, Newton sided firmly with the alchemists. He believed that the spiritual state of the experimenter was intimately connected with the outcome of the experiment. Perhaps Newton's appointment as president of the Royal Society and master of the Royal Mint confirmed that the upper echelon of scientists at the time believed alchemy was a more complete view of the world than chemistry. Conclusion. An underappreciated aspect of alchemy is how much of a revolutionary movement it was. Throughout history, alchemists were intellectual rebels at constant odds with authority. Not torture nor threats of death nor eternal damnation could dissuade them from speaking out about the true nature of the universe as they saw it. Their inner passion, the secret fire that burned in their souls, prevented them from abandoning the search for truth. That fire can be felt in the words of Giordano Bruno, who said, "The fools of the world have been those who established religions, ceremonies, laws, faith, and artificial rules of life. The greatest asses of the world are those who, lacking all understanding, rot in perpetual pedantry." Many alchemists were martyrs in the struggle for freedom of consciousness, and the champion of their cause was John Locke, 1632 to 1704, an English statesman and member of Boyle's Invisible College of Alchemists. Locke believed that the fundamental human right to think and discuss new ideas should be implemented on all levels of government and culture. Known as the "father of liberalism," he insisted that tolerance, respect for ideas, and freedom of speech should become the laws of the land. Locke's writings inspired the Enlightenment, a late 17th-century movement that placed rational reasoning as the source of authority above the church and monarchies. Moreover, Locke showed that an objective understanding of the principles of clear thinking was necessary to scientific investigation. His work led to the birth of formal logic, as mathematicians throughout Europe tried to systemize the process of rational thought. In his essay, Concerning Human Understanding, Locke analyzed how the human mind acquires knowledge. He offered a straightforward explanation of how ideas originate from sensory experience, and how our mind examines, compares, classifies, and combines these ideas into related concepts. According to Locke, knowledge arises from awareness of the relationships between different concepts. The last great genius of the Renaissance, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, 1749 to 1832, not only defended freedom of consciousness but also tried to define and formalize how knowledge is acquired by the mind. Along with his contemporaries Immanuel Kant, 1724 to 1804, and George Hegel, 1770 to 1831, Goethe's ideas about the nature and workings of the mind became the basis for modern epistemology. As a youth, Goethe was deeply influenced by texts from Valentine, Paracelsus, and other alchemists, and he channeled his enthusiasm into a stream of poetic, mystical, and scientific works that presented alchemical ideas from a variety of viewpoints. He maintained a large alchemy lab at his home in Weimar, Germany, and applied alchemical symbolism in nearly all his works, including his play, Faust, which is considered one of the most powerful works in German literature. Goethe believed the essence of truth can be found in its contradictions, and he developed a method of cognition that consisted of, quote, holding two opposing truths in two hands and walking forward, in stubborn contemplation. He also extolled the importance of achieving a beginner's mind and being selective of the material that fills the mind. Beware of dissipating your powers, he warned other seekers, and strive to concentrate them. Focus your powers for something good and give up everything that can produce no result of consequence to you and is not suited to you. Fortify your creative toolkit with the most elevated works of the past upon which to build your own contribution. For you must be something in order to do something. That advice applies to anyone engaged in the search for truth, especially those at the cutting edge of knowledge. To remain free of cultural and scholarly biases, we must keep the secret fire burning within. That is especially important in the current struggle in the discipline of consciousness studies, between materialists, who believe consciousness is a physical process taking place only in the brain, and phenomenalists, who believe consciousness is the primary reality and physical objects are mental constructs. In the tension between these two diametrically opposed viewpoints, the truth can be discerned. As Goethe advised, we must hold the two truths in two hands and walk forward. Our minds must remain mercurial and free-flowing until that moment when truth shapes us into a stone, or in the words of Goethe, one must be something in order to do something. That is to say, from the alchemical viewpoint, until that moment when we become the philosopher's stone, to change our reality.